Unacademy. Let's crack it.
Hello everyone, I am here today to discuss some of the questions asked in UPSC Mains 2023. I will discuss General Studies Paper 1. The questions I have taken is of the Geography section. One of the such question reflecting on the screen is, discuss the consequence of climate change on the food security in tropical area. The question in simple terms means, we have to explain what is impact of climate change on the food security in tropical countries. Now, rather than directly going to the structure which we should follow in writing this answer, let me briefly explain about these terms. Tropical countries, all those countries which are confined within the tropical latitudes, that means within Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere to Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere, are called as tropical nations. So we can select some regions and some specific countries there. If we start from the west, Mesoamerica, Mexico, some Caribbean islands. In southern part, we can take an example of Peru, Brazil. Then we can shift to Africa, where we have Sahel region of Africa. Then we have that Sudan region of Africa. And then there are adjoining regions of West Asia, where we can take some example from the Iran also. And then there is Indian subcontinent, where we will specifically talk about India. And then there is Australia. Now question is climate change. Can I say climate change is a long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns? So climate change is long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. This long-term shift in the change in the temperature and weather patterns can be natural. Natural can be like sunspot activity, eccentricity, change in solar insolation, or it can be man-made like burning of fossils, emissions, deforestation, urbanization, etc. Naturally, one more can be there. So we know this meaning of the climate change. Another part is food security in tropical areas. Now, if you talk about food security, you need to understand food security has different dimensions. There are 4 pillars of food security. When we say one is availability, accessibility, utilization, and then stability. It means in tropical areas, due to the impact of the climate change, what will be the impact on availability of food, accessibility of food, stability, as well as utilization. And we need to understand one more thing, food security when we talk about, we should not only take in consideration about the food grains. Food security can be from the cattle, like milk giving cattle's milk, we can get their cheese. It can be from fishes, it can be poultry, etc. It means while we are explaining the availability, accessibility, we need to cater these spheres also. Briefly, if I explain you what food security means, according to the World Food Summit 1996, the most widely accepted definition is, food security exists when all the people at all times have physical and economical access. What is economical access? affordability. What is physical access? Availability. To sufficient, safe and nutritious food. To sufficient, safe and nutritious food that meets their dietary need and food preferences for active and healthy life. When I say food preferences, it should not be only from the food grains. It should be all the different type of food grains. It can be in the form of meat. It can be in the form of, let's say, eggs. It can be in the form of milk. It can be in the form of vegetable, fruits. Is it clear? Okay. Now, there was a report of the World Bank that 80% of the global population is at risk, and that risk is basically from crop failure and hunger. And this crop failure and hunger is directly related to climate change, which is very much prone in Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan region. And the people who are mainly affected with this, the farming families which are very poor and vulnerable. So it means climate change impact is mainly seen in the farming families because they are on the poorest side as well as on the vulnerability. So this is the definition of food security, and I told you what are the parameters of this food security. When you talk about pillars or dimensions of the food security, you have availability. I just discussed it with you. It is sufficient quantity of food of appropriate quality. It means you have to keep in view about the nutritious value of the food also, which should be supplied either domestically, that means by domestic production, or import, or it can be including the aid. Excess is the access by individual to adequate resources for acquiring appropriate food for nutritious diet. Can I say in accessibility there can be affordability also? So food should not be very costly. It should not be that only one section of the society or only few should be able to access the food. So it is all related to purchasing side. And when I say availability, it means supply side. Then it is utilization. It means utilization of food through adequate clean water, sanitization, health care to reach a state of nutritional well-being where all the physiological needs are met. Can I say it will depend on a lot of factors? Food कैसे store हो रहा है, storage of food, spilling of food, and after that we can say cooking, the way we cook the food, and after that even in this part if you talk about we are using pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and we know that they can also directly, indirectly reduce the nutritional value of the food. Then it is stability. It refers availability, accessibility and utilization. It means there should be stability in terms availability, supply side, accessibility and utilization. It means if there are some unforeseen conditions, like there can be economic crisis, if there is inflation, so food prices should not fluctuate much because then the weaker section of the society may not be able to afford it. So country should have a buffer stock. Second is due to climate change, if the food production decreases, then there should not be unequal distribution and accessibility of the food. So in one line means it must have access to adequate food all the times. It means household should not risk losing access to food as a consequence of sudden shock. These shocks can be in terms of economic or climate. Is it clear? Now, climate change and food security. This is how we have to address this part. It is projected that about 5 to 170 million people will be on the stage of hunger by the year 2080 if the food production will be same at the rate what it is being seen at present. First, climate change impact on the food security with respect to availability. Let's come to this. What is this availability? Simply supply side. And remember, when we talk about supply side, it should be nutritious food. When I'm talking about utilization, where we talk about a lot of factors like storage, spillage, transportation, use of chemical pesticides, and then how we metabolize that food. Availability means impact of food production and availability. Agriculture and food production will be impacted in complex ways. Like, if you talk about, it has direct and it has indirect effect also. If you talk about indirect, it will be by growth and distribution of incomes, thus demand for agriculture produce. It's a direct impact. When we talk, it is an indirect impact. When we talk about direct, through changes in agroecological conditions. What do you mean by agroecological conditions? Soil, rainfall, temperature, water availability of a particular region. It means with climate change, if there is an impact on the agroecological condition, soil, assume if the pH value of the soil will change, if soil will become highly saline, if the moisture content in the soil will decrease, lot of factors can be responsible for that. Maybe evapotranspiration is one of the factor. Using of such crops which require lot of water like rice. Then rainfall pattern, temperature change. If temperature will keep on increasing, winters will be even warm. The pest, when we talk about agricultural pest, they survive or their life cycle is good in warm climates. So it means in winters their life cycle is very short. But due to climate change, when the temperature is increasing, winters are also warm. So what will happen to the life cycle of these agriculture pests? It will increase and they will directly impact the spring crop. Lot of other factors can be there. Let's discuss one by one. This is what we have to study here. If you talk about IPCC's working committee, group 2, it has provided a detail of health impact of climate change. Now, impact of climate change on the health will not be only for the humans. It can be on the flora as well as fauna. With change in temperature conditions, if I say there can be impact on the animals, let's say cattle, cow, goat, buffaloes. Food utilization. It means in terms of the utilization, with increase in the global temperature, there will be some health consequences. And due to excessive rainfall in some areas, vector-borne diseases will be there, like cholera, malaria, which will decrease the labor productivity. If labor productivity will decrease, laborers, let's say those landless laborers, if I give an example, landless laborers, those landless laborers who are dependencies on the agriculture, if they will fall sick, they will not able to work. They don't have the insurance, they cannot claim the insurance. So what will happen? Economic crisis will be seen. If economic crisis in their life will be seen, they may not be able to afford the food. Second is, as vector-borne diseases will be there, it will impact the animals also. So we can obtain the food also from the animals, they will also get affected. Similarly, if there will be climate change impacts, let's say sea surface temperature is increasing, ocean acidification is happening. And if we talk about algal bloom, eutrophications are there, ocean acidifications are there. So fishing grounds can get depleted. If fishing will get affected, obviously it's going to also impact the food security. Fishing is an activity which helps in fulfilling the food security in the coastal areas. Now, after that, if you talk about impact or consequence on stability, impact on stability and food supply, global regional weather conditions are expected to become more variable than at present. So, with increase in severity of extreme events of cyclone, coastal areas will experience it. Storms will be there. If wind storms will be very strong, wind velocity will be very high during the time of cyclone, it can directly impact the agriculture crops. Second, it can increase the rainfall. There can be submergence of the coastal areas. Floods can be there. Flash floods will be there. If flash floods will be there common, it can destroy the agricultural crops. Hailstorms can destroy the agriculture crops, or in areas where there is dryness or because of the changing rainfall pattern, some areas can experience drought, because in dry areas if temperature will increase, evapotranspiration will be very high, water volume, water table will decrease, soil moisture will decrease, and those areas can experience drought. So it will directly affect the stability. Remember, I told you stability means there, in case of, like we discuss here, in case of sudden shocks, still food should be available. But we know if such shocks will be there, the people who are at the vulnerable section of the society will largely get affected. After that, if you talk about IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, its special report on emission scenarios, it says global temperature is projected to rise in a range from 1.8 to 4 degrees centigrade by year 2100. Second, increase in atmospheric concentration. Now, we say increase in atmospheric concentration is good because photosynthesis will be good, it is good for the crop yield, but it has some limitations and up to certain limit. So, it means estimate increase in the carbon dioxide concentration is projected to increase from present 421 ppm to 550 ppm by 2100. That means there will be an increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide levels. It is 50% increase since the industrialization has begun. क्या impact है? There are some positive impacts, there are some negative impacts. When you talk about positive effect, many crops, their productivity will increase. It means their per yield will increase. But it is only in some specific crops. The benefit is accumulation of the biomass because the rate of photosynthesis can increase. When we say positive effect on many crops, crops like rice, soya bean, their yield will increase by 10 to 20%. With respect to maize, sorghum, 0 to 10%. However, some cereals like forage crop show less protein concentration. It means quantity of the food is increasing but nutritional value in the food is decreasing. Similarly, very high carbon dioxide levels in some of the crops will not allow the stomata to open completely, thus it will directly impact the yield and it will directly impact the productivity. In tropical regions, we have some areas wet, we have some areas dry. Let's talk about first dry areas. Due to increase in evapotranspiration, soil moisture will decrease. It will result some cultivable areas may become unsuitable for cropping and some tropical grassland may increasingly become arid. So, agriculture will get affected here. Not only agriculture, if grasslands are not available, cattle rearing will get affected. If cattle rearing will get affected, obviously it will directly impact their yield in terms of there are some milch cattle, there are some cattle from where we obtain meat and beef. And in wet areas due to excessive rainfall, runoff will increase, can result into flood, will result into increase in erosion and finally destroy the crops. And due to melting of glaciers, if you see in tropic lands we have some glaciers. We can say melting or retreat of glaciers. Water volume will increase, runoff in the rivers will increase and it can increase the floods. Like if you talk about some incidences have happened in Peru, in Himalayas, we have a lot of such examples. Then if we move to another part, temperature and precipitation change. Let's first talk about the temperature change. Temperature change associated with the continuous emission of greenhouse gas will bring change in land suitability and crop yield. First, you need to understand tropical areas, those which are wet, rice is being cultivated. And it is related that already due to global warming, there has been lot of increase in greenhouse gas and with cultivation of rice, it will release, there will be emission of methane from the rice fields. So, there will be a contribution of greenhouse gases also from this. Now, I will come to this, what should be done then? Temperature, if you try to correlate, one factor we discussed that in some places there will be excessive rainfall and in some places there can be glacial retreat and in some places there can be droughts due to increase in evapotranspiration rates. Life cycle of some crop pest are stop and go. What it means? It means they will develop in relation to temperature. I just explained you earlier that some of the agriculture pests survive very well. Their life cycle is good in terms of warm temperature. But in winters, life cycle is decreased. But as now there will be warm winters, their life cycle will increase and they can directly affect the spring crop. So increased temperature will expand the range, that is life cycle of many pests, and increase ability of the pest population to survive in winter, and they will attack the spring crops. Is impact clear? And after that, if you talk about in coastal areas specifically, if I talk about, due to ocean acidification and eutrophication, there can be an impact on the marine life. Fishes will get affected. Not only this, in the fresh water, also the fishes will get affected, like in the ponds and in the rivers. So food security can get affected there also, in the parameters of availability, in the parameters of accessibility, utilization, and stability. So it means now when we have to address this question, the first part you should have start with the introduction, what tropical areas are, and after that you could have given the report of the World Bank. As we discuss it here, you can use this in the introduction part, that 80% of the global population is at the risk, which is from the crop failure and hunger. And the report is further saying, there is one more report which says that about 5 to 170 million people will be projecting towards the hunger risk by 2080 if the food security or if the availability of the food remains same at the rate what it is at present. It means with increased climate change, it's gonna directly impact it with respect to these parameters which I told you. Okay. So after addressing that part in your introduction, if you come to the subject part, mention it, impact of climate change in tropical areas in food security. Like I told you, wet to dry areas. Then we discussed the carbon dioxide level concentration. Droughts can be there. Soil salinity can increase. If soil salinity can increase, like we have seen in India, wheat. Under high temperature, if temperature increases, wheat cannot survive. Survival is very less. It means per yield hectare will decrease. Like we have seen, as in India we have heat waves. This is what you have to write about the heat waves. Because of the heat waves, what is happening? We have observed that wheat production has fallen in India, especially in Punjab and Haryana. These are the mainly areas affected. That's why we have stopped the exports of the wheat also this year. So when we talk about heat waves have directly impact the productivity, it means availability is less. If availability will not be there, there will be food inflation, demand and supply gap will be there, so affordability will not be there, that is it will directly impact the accessibility. Is it clear? Now heat waves, they will have a direct impact on the human health. So it can directly impact metabolism, it can impact the storage, it can impact the transportation, so utilization will get affected, and it will directly result into destabilization, so stability part will also get affected. Is it clear? एक example हमने ये दे दी. Another example you can talk about Bangladesh. Already poverty is there, and due to sea level change, rise in sea level, there has been salt water intrusion. This salt water intrusion has directly impacted rice crop. So productivity of rice has decreased because the salinity has increased. Apart from that, if you talk about country like Vietnam, where per capita income is good, they have also get affected with this climate change, because as sea level has increased, again along the deltas there, where rice cultivation was done, it has directly been affected. Similarly, if you talk about another factor, Peru, Brazil, there has been droughts in Brazil. because of which the productivity has fallen there. So productivity has decreased. You can give this example. I think in the year 2016-17, continuous drought-like conditions were there. Similarly, in Peru, due to glacial retreat from the Andes mountain, and due to high evapotranspiration, there has been water scarcity, and in some regions due to high rainfall, there has been flooding. Climate change impact, you could have had El Nino. Indian Ocean Dipole directly impacts agriculture in India. And then we could have given example of Mesoamerican countries. Mexico. Another two, these examples in Mesoamerica, you can add Peru and Brazil there also. And if you talk about Africa, especially Sahel region, it is a transition zone between desert and Sudan type climate there. It is also getting affected. Grasslands are there getting affected. And apart from that, if you talk about Sudan type of climate, these all areas are getting affected. In the itself there, if you talk about Northern Africa especially, there has been droughts. Apart from that, now this is the impact of agriculture in tropical countries. Like we can give example, bushfire. Because of this El Nino conditions in Australia has also impacted agriculture on a large scale. Not only this, due to increase in temperature there in Australia, it has directly impacted the animal husbandry. So these were the impacts which we can give there. Now the question is, what can be the conclusion? Now conclusion in this is, first we should develop salinity resistant crops, drought resistant variety of crops, and then organic matter in the soil should increase. Apart from that, selection of the crop is very important. The crops which demand large amount of the water, their use should be less. Like India has already done, Cellular and Microbiological Institute in India in Hyderabad have developed one of the drought resistant variety of rice which is called as Sambar Masuri. So now the same rice can be grown in the drought prone areas and it doesn't require much water. Then you can link it with SDG goal 2 also. Let's now discuss about another question. The question is reflecting on the screen. Why is southwest monsoon called Purvaiya, that is easterly, in the Bhojpur region? And how has this directional seasonal wind influenced the cultural ethos of the region? Now in this question, first is southwest monsoon. And we know that monsoon is the seasonal reversal of a wind. It is derived from a word Mosam, which is an Arabic word. So the winds which change their direction with change in season is known as monsoon winds. The winds change their direction because of shifting of pressure belts, which is intertropical convergence zone. ITCZ shifts towards the north, which is because of apparent shifting of sun rays. Second thing is, if it is southwest, then why in Bhojpur region it is called as Purvaiya? Now, Bhojpur, you need to first understand, Bhojpur is also one of the district in Bihar, but here it is talking about a region. So it is a regional concept. So it means एक तो Bhojpur is one of the district in Bihar. Another is Bhojpur region. Even if you don't know about this region, you could have clearly linked it with the Bhojpuri language, which is mainly spoken in UP, that is specifically Eastern UP and the Bihar. So it means this region is Eastern UP and Bihar. Regional division wise, it is basically Mithila region, and some part of Magad region, or we can say Magad plains. Apart from this, the regions of Jharkhand, Mahdeshi, some part of MP, they are also included in it. Now question is, in this region, if it is southwest monsoon, why it is called easterly winds there? And second is, how it influences the cultural ethos of this region. Culture includes their tradition, dietary habits, can I say food, religious activities like worshipping particular god, folk and songs, agriculture practices, etc. So let's connect first this part. So when we say southwest monsoon, we know that southwest monsoon is simply the seasonal reversal of wind. It means, if we consider this to be a rough sketch of India, here you have Arabian Sea, and this is your Bay of Bengal. We know that southwest monsoon winds this is southwest monsoon of Arabian Sea, this is southwest monsoon of Bay of Bengal. Due to the topographical features of the Arakan Yoma of Myanmar and Himalayas, these winds get deflected and enter towards India from the east, that is from the eastern coast. Now, there is a role of tropical easterly jet also in this, but the main role is played by the topography. And here, if we talk about this region specifically, this region, Bihar and UP, this is this Bhojpur region. Wind is southwest. We name the wind from the direction of its origin. Like if we talk about this wind, north, south, west, east. So this will be southeast coming from the east. If we talk about this wind, this is north, south, west, east, it is southwest. So it is southwest here. Now, as soon as the southwest wind is entering, the southwest monsoon winds are entering India from the east, let's check their direction. If we go with the direction part, north, south, west, east. So in Bihar and UP, it appears to come from the east, that is called as easterly or Purvaiya. Now, if I specifically here discuss with respect to the map, this is equator, 21st of the March, which is our equinox. Sun rays are falling directly over the equator. After April, ITZ low pressure will shift here, May here, and by June it will establish itself like this. So it means this low pressure have now shifted here, which is called as intertropical convergence zone. The winds which were coming from here are southeast trade winds, north, south, west, east. They were supposed to reach towards the low pressure which was at equator, but the same low pressure is now present in this region. As soon as these winds begin to travel to this low pressure, they cross the equator, and in accordance to the Coriolis deflection, they will deflect to the right of their direction. So these winds become here southwest from Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. Now because of the topography, if you see here, you have the Arakan Yuma range and all here, you have Himalayas here, these winds will enter India like this. Now let's come to the detailed part of the question. Why it is called as Purvaya? So it means when southwest monsoon winds due to topographical barrier get deflected and enter India from east, it means from the Bay of Bengal. So the Bay of Bengal of southwest monsoon branch, when reaches here, the direction becomes easterly. Thus it is called as Purvaya. First part clear? Second is how this directional seasonal wind system influence the cultural ethos of the region. Now we have to discuss in these parameters. If you talk about first part here, festivals. Festivals are linked with this monsoon season, like Tej, Raksha Bandhan, Sawan. They are linked with the southwest monsoon. And during this time, worship of some deities like rain god, etc. are worshipped in order so that rainfall should be good and it will give good irrigation and agriculture will be prosperous. This area is semi-arid area. If you talk about this region is semi-arid, this Bhojpur region, and it receives monsoon rainfall by southwest branch, which is called as Purvaya. So agriculture here is dependent on this, and even if rainfall will be good, there will be good water volume in the rivers and irrigation can be there better utilized. After this, food. During this time, though temperature is very hot and humid during this time, but when there will be a rainfall, there will be a slight pleasant weather. Thus the local food at that time is most favorable, pakoras and hot beverage like tea. And apart from this, for centuries, if we talk about some poets, for the centuries, the poets, they have used romantic ballads in the dialects of Braj, Avdhi, describing dark clouds. So ballads by the romantic poets during this time are being used, describing the dark clouds. Like if I talk about these dark clouds, Gangor Ghata. Not only this, thundering rain. Like Garaj Baras. And similarly, if you talk about easterly winds, with respect to the reference of Purvaiyas in a lot of songs. You will find Purvaiya word used there in lot of songs in the Bollywood also. And apart from this, food habits, worship, folk songs, agriculture practices, traditions, people during this time use light, breathable, green color clothes called as Haryali. So this is how it affects or how it determines the cultural ethos of that area. Now, you can add into the conclusion part also that in India, traditions and festivals are very linked with the monsoon. India being an agrarian economy is dependent on the agriculture. Agriculture is directly dependent upon the monsoon, because if monsoon is good, rainfall will be good. Now let's discuss the another question. The question is, how are fjords formed and why do they constitute some of the most picturesque areas of the world? Now first, what are fjords? They are related to the glacial erosion. And why they make such beautiful picturesque areas of the world? Let's now first discuss what fjords are. Fjords are glacial troughs occupied by the sea. It means they are the part which are formed due to the erosional activities of the glacier, but however these valleys are now submerged under water. Or we can also call them arm of the sea, which have occupied U-shaped glaciated valleys below the sea level. Through mechanism of abrasion, abrasion is a process of scraping, scratching or grinding the surface. Like when river flows, river performs abrasion, attrition. Similarly, while glacier moves, glacier perform the abrasion and the plucking. Plucking means while glacier is moving, it is plucking the sediment along with it. By the valley glaciers descending from the coastal mountains. It means the mountains which are around the coastal areas. Assume this is any sea here, and here if any glacier is descending down. Now, how we further characterized it? It is characterized by steep sided valleys and several hanging valleys. They are very common in coast of Norway, Greenland, Alaska, Chile, British Columbia, New Zealand, Labrador, Patagonia, Alaska. Origin. If you talk about formation or origin, there are three viewpoints regarding their formation. First is, deep valleys were carved out by glacier descending from the coastal mountains above the sea level. One is this concept. Another is supposed to be formed due to tectonic factors. According to this concept, it says these are the grabens which are submerged underwater due to faulting of coastal land. It means along coastal area there has been some tectonic activities which has resulted into the creation of the faults, and a graben is created. What is graben? In simple terms, if you talk about rift valleys kind. And another says it is formed by glacial erosion below sea level. It says sea level has lowered. In Pleistocene age, pre-existing fluvial originated valleys were further deepened by the glacial erosion, and once deglaciation takes place, it means when later melting of the glacier takes place. Now the same further deepened glaciated valleys due to the increase in the sea level got submerged, which were called as fjords. This is what you were supposed to mention. Now, why they have such, if you talk about another part, picturesque areas of the world. First, if you talk about because of their formation. The formation part I already discussed with you. It is because of their formation. They give a beautiful landscape. Second, they are very rich in marine biodiversity. Like in some of the areas we get corals also. Some of the corals also survive in the cold waters. Remember, we have two types of the corals, hermatype or ahermatypic. Now, after that you will find their rocky islands also. And then if we talk about another part, it is their geology. So because of these, they have such picturesque characteristics, thus very well known in the different part of the world. The next question reflecting on the screen is, comment on the resource potential of the long coastline of India and highlight the status of natural hazard preparedness in these areas. Resource. Can I say anything which can be utilized for the human welfare is a resource? And we know that when natural material become resource, whenever any natural material become resource, can I say human begin to value it? So now the question is about the potential of such resources on the long coastline of India. In India we have two coastlines. One is western coastline, which is facing Arabian Sea. Another is eastern coastline, which is facing Bay of Bengal. Now, on this coastline, there are abundance of the resources. Some of the resources can be biotic, some of the resources can be abiotic. If I talk about some of the biotic resources, like fishery can be there, we can perform aquaculture also there, mangroves can be there, specifically along the Ganga Brahmaputra Delta, KG Delta, and some of the regions of the Gulf region, right? Kutch region of Gujarat, and some abiotic minerals or abiotic energy sources. If I consider in terms of minerals, these minerals can be metallic, these can be non-metallic. If you talk about some minerals, salt pans of Mumbai, then we can say some of the metallic minerals, like if we talk about their tin, copper, manganese, etc. There are some metallic minerals there. On this coastline, we can have another important, on the Malabar coast, monazite sand, which can have a rich resources of thorium, which can be used in the nuclear energy. So there can be abundance of resources. Let's address one by one. Fishery. If we talk about eastern and western coastline, the backbone for this coastline is the fishery. In India, India contribute 8% globally to the total fish production. India is third largest producer of the fish in the world, and in terms of aquaculture, India ranks second in terms of the production. Minerals, as I just told you, there can be some metallic, there can be non-metallic minerals. Like if I talk about salt pan, Mumbai, we have the largest salt pans. So it will help in the production of the salt. Similarly, if we talk about Gujarat coastline, salt is obtained from there. Apart from that, if we talk about these minerals, there can be manganese nodules. Though majority of the polymetallic nodules are seen in the ocean bottom, however, on the shelf of some of the part of the India, there are some manganese nodules also. They can be also very much useful for the economic development of the country, especially in the metallurgical industry. Another part in terms of the same metals, if you talk about, there is tin, zinc, etc. Copper is there. Now minerals, let's talk about energy sector. We have solar floating plants, or we can say solar floating parks. You can write another about wind energy. We can talk about tidal energy. So these renewable sources of energy will help India to fetch its energy security. Apart from that, we can also mention here, in terms of energy, we have petroleum and natural gas. Especially if you talk about petroleum and natural gas, Mumbai High, Gulf of Cambay, or we also call it Gulf of Khambat. And apart from that, you have KG Basin. So they will also help India to achieve its energy security. So there is a lot of potential. Apart from that, food security, we can connect this food security again with respect to fishery, aquaculture, as well as towards the mangroves, because mangrove is also used as a vegetable as well as a fodder. So we can add that part here. Employment, so whether it is extraction of minerals in the energy sector or management of the forest along the coastal areas, or even if you talk about the energy sector, renewable and non-renewable sector, it will generate overall employment. Then if you talk about biodiversity, mangrove along the Ganga Brahmaputra delta and the Krishna Godavari delta, mangrove has both economic and social significance. If you talk about some of the economic significances, it has a good quality of the timber, which is having high durability, used for making boats by the fishermen. It is used as a fuel wood there because emissions are very less and the calorific value is very high. It also acts as a carbon sequestration there. It also acts as a buffer which will protect the pollutants from the sea. Apart from that, it has also some medicinal values and it also generates a biomass. Similarly, if we talk about another, we have corals. Corals can promote their tourism, so we can call that coral tourism. So these all are the multiple significances which you could have mentioned there in your answers. Now another apart from that is highlight the status of natural hazard in the preparedness in these areas. If we come to another part, disaster preparedness, or in terms of hazard preparedness. First is regarding cyclones. We have National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Zone. Then you have Coastal Regulation Zone. Then you have Integrated Coastal Zone Management Project. These are some of the initiatives taken. Indian Meteorological Department has given a color coding of the cyclones, like yellow color indicating the cyclone alert, which is given around 72 hours before. After that, orange color, which is regarding the warning given 48 hours before, and then red, it is post landfall, it is around 24 hours. Now we have another there, cyclone warning system. Cyclone warning systems. We have cyclone area warning systems. Which are along the different states, coastal states of India, like in one of the district of Gujarat in Ahmedabad, Bhubaneswar, Chennai, then you have Kolkata, Trivandrum, and then you have Visakhapatnam. Along these different districts of the different states which are along the coast, these warning systems will give us the information about the cyclones, from their formation to their intensity to their post-fall. Apart from that, regarding tsunami, which is another disaster through which the Indian coastline is affected, no one forgets about. We cannot forget about the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Indian Tsunami Early Warning System, which is established at Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Science in Hyderabad, which is under the Ministry of Earth Science. Apart from that, we have Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. It has made 4 regional areas like Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea. All these 4 regions, time to time they share information with them. Time to time preparedness and mitigation measures are discussed, and such one initiatives in the Indian Ocean also. Apart from that, if we move towards another disasters which are very common, they are flood, and due to climate change the sea level change is seen. Floods can be there riverine floods or because of rise in sea level also, or it can be because of the tropical storms, etc. Now to mitigate this, disaster preparedness involve their flood forecasting. Already we have National Flood Commission in Delhi. Indian Meteorological Department is also time to time taking the surveillances there. Flood forecasting, monitoring of flood, adaptation strategies. If we talk about sea level change, building resilient infrastructure, building structures away from the coast, generally which is said 250 meters away from the coast. Management of these floods, especially if you talk about growing vegetation like mangroves in controlling these disasters. These are some of the initiatives they are taken, which we could have mentioned there in our answer. There are many more, but there is a restriction of the word limit, so you have to restrict yourself to the limited points. Now, if we specifically here talk about its conclusion part, you can link it with food security, especially if you talk about blue economy, where you have Sagarmala, Bharatmala also, blue bonds, and after that we can link it with SDG, especially if you talk about life underwater. It is SDG goal number 14. Similarly, we can further link it with respect to SDG goal number 11 and 13. Like 11 says to minimize the death regarding any disaster, and around this 13 which is regarding the climate change. The another question which is reflecting on your screen is, identify and discuss the factors responsible for diversity of natural vegetation in India, assess the significance of wildlife sanctuaries. The first part of the question is, we have to mention about the factors which are responsible for the diversity of natural vegetation in India. If I say growth of any vegetation depends upon several factors like temperature, precipitation, type of soil, topography, like plains, mountains, coastal areas, plateaus, angle of slope, and then altitude, distance from the coast, it means continentality effect or maritime effect. So these are some of the factors which will determine the diversity of natural vegetation in India. If you talk about India, India is blessed with the varied climatic conditions. If we move towards the north, above the North Indian plains, we have their temperate climate, which is because of the altitude factor. And along the plains towards the south, we have tropical to subtropical climate. One more factor which determine it is the wind pattern, or we can say the movement of wind. So all these factors more or less affect the vegetation of the place. Now one by one, if I take all those, first geographical location. If you talk about Indian Peninsula, or Deccan Plateau of India is one of the oldest physiographic division of India. Its location is, it is bounded, if we draw roughly it like this side Arabian Sea, another part from Bay of Bengal. So it means it experiences both maritime as well as continental effect. Those areas which are close to the coast, they receives lot of rainfall, so they experience maritime climate. Which are away from the coast, they experience continentality effect. Rainfall variation will be observed there. Apart from that, if you talk about topography, in mountains, if we move towards these mountains, and here if we talk about mountains, it is your Himalayas. Here you will find tropical forest, then temperate forest, and as you move to the top, you will find alpine forest. So factor which is contributing in this part is your altitude. Same in the higher reaches, we have alpine vegetation, or we can call alpine meadows, where you can have thick mat forming grasses. And as you move to the lower regions, there we have subtropical forest. You can have subtropical forest, here you can have coniferous forest, then you can have alpine forest. Temperature, humidity and type of soil, they also play an important role in the distribution of the plant and the vegetation population and their diversity also. If you talk about the precipitation, especially if you talk about southwest monsoon, in Western Ghats, which is towards the windward slope, due to high rainfall, there you have tropical vegetation, and on the leeward slope, we have arid climate. Then if you talk about type of soil, in India we have different type of soil like laterite soil, especially if we give an example, Andhra Pradesh, we have black soil, which is suitable for the cotton cultivation, locally referred as regur soil. Similarly, we have mountain soil, which is considered to be immature soil. So different type of soil will here support different types of vegetation, which results into the much diversity there. Similarly, if you talk about pH value of the soil, fertility of the soil, similarly, if you talk about another factor, in desert of, let's say, Thar, you have thorny bushes. But as you move towards the east, that is eastern Rajasthan towards the Gangetic plains, you have green fertile tracts. Let's say in Rajasthan, these green fertile tracts are locally called as Rohi. And as you move towards the plains, there you have tropical to deciduous vegetation. Tropical to deciduous vegetation. So it means the climatic factors, like if we generally talk about topography, altitude, temperature, humidity, type of soil, moisture level in the soil, and then if you talk about this distance from the sea coast, maritime and continentality factor, they on a large scale affect the growth of flora and fauna as well as the diversity of the vegetation. Even if you talk about small example here, in terms of the fruits, in Himalayan region we have temperate fruits. So temperature is one of the factor there. When I say temperate fruits like apricot, walnut, apple, but as soon as you move towards the tropical regions, that means towards the south, you have orange, we have banana, you have mangoes, lychee. In Arunachal, if you talk about, you have kiwi. So such diversity is because of the different factors which we have mentioned. So topography can be one of the factor, altitude can be a factor, soil type can be one of the factor, different soil support different type of vegetation. Another part of the question is significance of wildlife sanctuary is rainforest region of India. It means what is the significance of these wildlife sanctuaries in the rainforest of India. First, if you talk about, there we have biodiversity conservation. Rainforests have rich biodiversity. It is also called as the hotspot biodiversity. It has lot of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks and marine protected areas where there is conservation of the different types of the species, which can be from the different list, endangered to threatened. Second, endemic and endangered species protection. If we talk about line-tailed macaque, Nilgiri Thar, Great Indian Bustard. Similarly, if you talk about rainforest regions of Western Ghat and Northeastern, have numerous endemic species. What are these endemic species? Which are not present anywhere else. So they can be also preserved there. Then they have a moderate climatic influence also. Rainforests regulate the local and global temperature. There is transpiration. Rainforests have the broad leaves, so transpiration rate is high, which can result there into the high humidity in the atmosphere, and over the period of time it can result into the precipitation also. And then it helps in the carbon sequestration. Water management during the time of natural disaster like floods, they will help in controlling the runoff of the water, thus will control the soil erosion, and they can also help in recharging the water table. After that, they can promote the ecotourism also, and they are very useful for the research and education. They also have some cultural and spiritual values like sacred groves. It means they have some religious importance. Lot of tribes, they worship such trees over there. So this is one of the reason, and so this is one of the significance of wildlife sanctuaries in the rainforest region of India. From being net importer in 1960s, India has emerged as a net exporter of the world in terms of food. So it means from being a net importer of the food grains, India used to import the food grains from other countries. Like there was a program called as PL 480, Public Law 480. It is also called as Food for Peace. It was started by United States of America. So India used to fulfill its food security through the large imports from United States of America in terms of the wheat. So same question is here. From being a net importer in the 1960s, India has now emerged as a net food exporter. It means now instead of importing the food grains, we are now exporting the food grain to other countries. Like we have helped Afghanistan, we are helping a lot of Middle East nations, we are also helping the Sri Lanka. Now it is saying provide the reasons. What are the reasons for it? So we need to first understand, after independence, already there was drain of wealth done by the Britishers during the colonial era. India has seen severe droughts and famines. Potential of irrigation was there, but utilized irrigation potential was not there. Maybe lack of technology like canal irrigation, tubewell irrigation. Rural electrification was not there. Crop diversity was very less because of lack of high-yielding varieties. As Indian soil mainly lacks in fertility, especially with respect to the nitrogen, so fertilizers were not available. Backward-forward linkages were not very well developed because of lack of transport and communication. Storage facilities were not there. Crop and weather insurance was not there. Agro-based policies were not well defined. So lot of factors were there because of which food production was not good in India. Like if you talk about land divisions was not properly there. Now what happened? All the credit of this goes to Green Revolution now. Agricultural revolution in India. This Green Revolution in India started in 1961. It started as Intensive Agriculture District Program. It was taken as an experiment in the 7 districts of India and it was successful. And later on, it was extended to 32 more districts in 1963-64. However, with the high-yielding variety program, 1965-66, the main phase of the Green Revolution began there in India. Now what all has happened during this time period? During this time period, some components were there improved. If I talk about the components of Green Revolution, like National Seed Corporation was established along with the 13 state seed corporations. The main aim of them was development of high-yielding variety seeds, that is procurement of the seed, storage of the seed, distribution of the seed. Fertilizer development. Lot of fertilizer plants were opened. Indian soil was lacking in fertility and there was no scientific ratio of the fertilizers used. At the time, the usage of fertilizer was 3:8:1. This was the usage of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. However, the scientific ratio is 4:2:1. This has improved after this. Similarly, in terms of the irrigation, Command Area Development Program of 1974, like Indira Gandhi Canal, Command Area Development Program. Apart from that, not only this, Sharda Canal, Rapti Canal, and if you talk about Narmada Canal, different canals were constructed throughout the India, especially in southern part of India, Tamil Nadu and Andhra along the river valleys. Apart from this, in irrigation, tubewell irrigation was focused, which was also called as switch button technology. The decade of 1980s was called as the revolution in terms of the tubal revolution. So now the irrigation was also improved. Apart from that, if you talk about land reforms were initiated with the slogan land to tiller, which was included in the 9th schedule of Indian Constitution. Initially, farmers in India were performing subsistence agriculture. So now farmers start focusing towards intensive and extensive agriculture. Apart from, another component was rural electrification. Like Pradhan Mantri Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana. At the time of independence, there were around 1300 villages only electrified out of 6 to 7 lakh villages. At present, if you talk about, we have almost more than 100% of the India is now electrified. Apart from this, credit facilities were available, improved, like regional rural banks were established, NABARD was established, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, cooperative societies, and in 90s, Kisan Credit Card Scheme was there established. So it means all these initiatives were taken so that credit facilities, irrigation, fertilizer, high yielding variety, electrification, all should be available to the farmers, and these all were lacking. That's why the agriculture was not good. But once all these were instituted, the agriculture become more prosperous. Per yield food production increases. Similarly, if you talk about crop specific weather insurance was there introduced, that their yield will be good. It gives a sense of assurance to the farmers that in case of any natural hazard, they will not go into the debt. Apart from that, storage was developed. So spilling of the food was protected. Now, many more other initiatives were taken, like backward forward linkages, and specifically if you talk about present time, in this irrigation, we have accelerated irrigation benefit program. So it has increased the potential of the irrigation in India. So when all these things were introduced, the per yield hectare in the food production increases. Later on, some policy related to agriculture that was introduced. Agricultural markets were well developed, because of which forward and backward linkages were very developed, and agro-based industries were developed. Apart from that, cropping patterns were changed, or we can say cropping pattern become diverse. As all these things happen, agriculture become more prosperous. So it means if we talk about one of the component, it was development in fertilizer, diversification of crop, it means cropping pattern become much diverse. Apart from that, MSPs play a very important role, high yielding varieties play a very important role. It has a short growing period, so cropping intensity increases. So cropping intensity increases, irrigation potential it increases. Then technology like use of machinery, degree of mechanization increases, uses of tractor, harvester, trawlers, seed drillers, precision farming. These were those districts like Shabad in Bihar, Aligarh, Jalandhar, West Godavari in Andhra Pradesh, Tanjore and Pali region of Rajasthan, where initially intensive area district program was introduced as an experiment. It became successful. Then 1964 it was launched with Intensive Agriculture Area Program, which was extended to 32 districts, and with the High Yielding Variety Program of 1965-66, it was basically called as the Green Revolution. And all these components were there on which government has efficiently worked and food production has increased. If you talk about with the per capita income in India increasing of the middle class, affordability of the costly foods increases. Not only Green Revolution, we have another revolutions like White and Blue Revolution. They have also increased the food productivity, and means another, if you talk about, credit goes to Rainbow Revolution. It means a revolution in different crops. These were some of the factors because of which India at present is now abundant in terms of the food grains. Another question is there, why is world confronted with the crisis of availability and access to freshwater resources? Now to understand this, we need to work on three terms. First, what is water scarcity? Though we don't have to mention this, but we should know. What is water stress and what is water risk? Scarcity, it refers to the volumetric abundance or lack thereof water supply, which is calculated as ratio of human water consumption to the available water supply in a given area. Water stress refers to the ability or lack thereof to meet human and ecological demand of water. So it is not necessary if an area is water stress, it will be water scare also. So you can say it is a narrower concept, water stress is a very broader concept. And risk means water scarcity, pollution, flood, drought, etc. Now the question is, why is world confronted with the crisis of availability and access to fresh water? Let's discuss some of the points here. When you talk about this water, 70% of our earth comprises the water. Now it means this water is very easy available, but it's not in reality like that. When we talk about fresh water is that stuff which is used for drinking, bathing or irrigating agricultural fields, and this is very rare. Why? 3% of the fresh water is available on this earth surface. That means when I am talking about the 70% of the water, earth is covered by the 70% of the water. Out of that 70% of the water, 3% available is fresh water, and 2/3 of that is tapped or tucked in glaciers. So it is very difficult to take that water out from the glaciers because they are in solid state, frozen form. It can be permafrost regions, cryosphere. Around 1.1 billion of people worldwide lack access to fresh water, and 2.7 billion find water scarce at least a month of a year. Now, one of the reason, if you talk about, is agriculture. Agriculture consumes more water than any other source. It means apart from all other source, the demand of water in agriculture is very high. So due to which the water table is decreasing. Apart from this agriculture, if I link it with urbanization also. Rapid urbanization has increased the demand of water, as well as this urbanization has resulted into concretization, due to which water percolation is not taking place and thus underground water is not timely getting recharged. Focus on those crops which require lot of water like rice, sugarcane. They require lot of water to grow. Simply if I talk about high yielding varieties, these high yielding varieties pre-required condition is assured irrigation. So it means they also take a lot of water from the soil. Now what is the need here? For the development of drought resistant high yielding varieties, like Cellular and Microbiological Institute in Hyderabad has recently developed drought resistant variety of rice called as Sambar Masuri. Second is, in this agriculture, another is with rapid increase in population, with rapid increase in population, with rapid, another is with rapid increase in population, there is a demand for more food, so more area is covered under agriculture. There is a demand for water, water can be used for drinking there, for irrigation, so that has resulted into the shortage. Because simultaneously this urbanization, concretization is not allowing the water table to properly get recharged. Industrialization, there is a demand in the industries also, like if you talk about cotton textile, for bleaching and dyeing of cloth, lot of water is used. For steel manufacturing, steel industry, there is huge amount of water required. Similarly, if you talk about washing of coal, there is a huge demand of water. So now these days there is a tussle between agriculturalists and industrialists. Both are demanding the water, but the available water is less. Another, if you talk about shale gas mining, in shale gas mining where hydraulic fracking is done, hydraulic fracking, fresh water is used in the hydraulic fracking, that means pure water, and there are a lot of chemicals used in the fracking. So when those chemicals are injected in the ground or injected in the rocks, they also contaminate there. Apart from that, you can add in agriculture eutrophication, which has resulted into algal bloom. So dead water zones are created, terrestrial dead water zones, coastal dead water zones, which has further resulted into the shortage of water available. And the data says lot of water systems that keep ecosystem thriving and feed a growing population have been water stressed, and half of the world's wetland has now been disappeared. So these are some of the reasons which has resulted into the shortage of water. We can even add changing climate and cropping pattern. If we discuss, some of the areas because of the climate change are experiencing drought, some of the areas are experiencing extreme floods. It is believed that the rate at which the water consumption is at present, if it continues with the same rate, by the year 2025, 2/3 of the world population will face the water scarcity. So thus, what could be the conclusion of this? Conclusion is water management, water harvesting. Second, use of those crops which does not require much water. Second, less use of chemical pesticides, less use of chemicals. Use of water for hydraulic fracking can be the recycled water. So all these initiatives can be taken for the conservation of this water. Like, it can be linked with the Sustainable Development Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, and awareness like 22nd March to be declared as the World Water Day. Thank you.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.